The snow had begun earlier than anyone expected. That Christmas Eve, soft at first, like scattered feathers, drifting from a quiet sky. Then thicker, heavier, until the entire world seemed wrapped in a muffled white hush. The kind of hush that makes a person feel small or alone, depending on what their heart carries. Lena Ward sat on the cold metal bench at the bus stop, her white navy dress uniform stark against the dark night. Snowflakes clung to her sleeves, to her cap, to the trembling tips of her eyelashes. She didn't bother brushing them away. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, fingers pressed together until her knuckles burned, as if the pressure might somehow keep her from falling apart. But nothing could hold back the truth. She was lost. The message had come only an hour earlier. Her father, her anchor in this world, had been rushed into surgery after complications from a heart condition he had kept hidden from her. And Lena, despite 6 years of spotless service, had been ordered to stay on base due to a sudden suspension. Suspended for something she didn't do. Accused without evidence. Silenced without explanation. And now barred from leaving in her father's last, most fragile hours. All because someone with more rank and less conscience had signed one piece of paper. The weight of that paper pressed on her chest, harder than any winter wind. She bowed her head. Hot tears escaped despite her attempts to swallow them. A uniform like hers was not made for crying. Yet here she was, decorated, disciplined, dignified, and still just a daughter who might lose her father without even saying goodbye. A bus rumbled in the distance, headlights cutting through falling snow. She looked up briefly. Not because she planned to board her suspension made that impossible, but because movement broke the stillness she'd been drowning in. The bus slowed. Air brakes hissed. A driver leaned slightly, checking if anyone was waiting to board. No one moved. Lena stayed where she was. The bus pulled away, and then from behind it, a tiny figure emerged. A little girl, 3, maybe 4, bundled in a bright red dress with a matching knit hat and mittens. She looked like she had stepped out of a Christmas card. Rosy cheeks, wide blue eyes, and a sense of purpose too large for such a small body. Snowflakes settled on her mittened hands as she held a warm cup of cocoa steam curling upward into the cold night. She walked straight toward Lena. Lena blinked, startled instinctively, straightening her posture. Children rarely approached someone in uniform unless encouraged, and certainly not with such confidence. The little girl stopped right in front of her, lifted the cup with both hands, and said in a soft, breathy voice, "Please don't cry, ma'am. You can borrow my dad." Lena froze. For a moment, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry harder. The child's generosity, so innocent and immediate, pierced straight through her defenses. Tears trembled again at the corners of Lena's eyes, not from despair this time, but from the strange, unexpected warmth that rose in her chest. "Sweetheart," Lena whispered, her voice unsteady. "That's a very kind thing to say." The little girl nodded solemnly. "Daddy helps people when they're sad. He helps me when I cry too." She offered the warm cup again. "You need it more than I do." Lena's throat tightened. She reached out gently, closing her hands around the cardboard cup, feeling heat seep into her palms. It had been hours since she'd felt warmth of any kind. "Thank you," she murmured. "My name's Riley." The girl announced proudly, as though this information might solve everything. "Hello, Riley," Lena said softly, managing a small smile. "I'm Lieutenant Ward." Riley tilted her head thoughtfully, as if studying Lena's face for clues. Children had a way of sensing things adults tried to hide. The sadness, the fear, the exhaustion. Riley seemed to gather it all in that single serious look. Then her gaze shifted past Lena over her shoulder toward the bus stop sign, where the snow swirled beneath the street lamp. Someone was approaching. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in worn military-style work clothes, dusted with snow. His stride was steady, deliberate. Someone who knew how to move quietly despite his size. His hair long enough to curl slightly from the moisture in the air, framed a face both weathered and thoughtful. A man who had lived through storms both literal and otherwise. Riley turned and waved. "Daddy, I told you she needed help." The man stopped mid-step, his eyes shifting instinctively to Lena, taking in her uniform, her posture, the way she held the cup, as if anchoring herself with it. His gaze softened, a recognition not of who she was, but of what she was feeling. He walked closer. "I'm sorry," he said gently, voice low and warm. Riley has a habit of noticing things, especially when someone's hurting. Lena swallowed, embarrassed. "I didn't realize I was that obvious." "You weren't," he replied. "Not to most people, but my daughter isn't most people." Riley tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, she was crying." Lena stiffened, but the man didn't look judgmental. He only nodded with a quiet understanding that carried no pity, just a kind of shared humanity. He extended a hand. "Graham Hale." Lena hesitated, then shook his hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. "Lieutenant Lena Ward." Their hands lingered half a heartbeat longer than expected, long enough for Lena to notice the faint scars across his knuckles marks of someone who had worked hard his entire life. Long enough for Graham to sense the tremor in her fingers. Long enough for Riley to beam like she had solved Christmas itself. Snow continued falling around them, soft, gentle, luminous. The night was still cold. Lena's troubles had not vanished, but something had shifted. A small girl had offered her cocoa, and a borrowed father. And in that quiet moment, wrapped in snowfall and kindness, Lena felt perhaps for the first time that day that she wasn't completely alone. For a long moment, the three of them simply stood there, under the dim street lamp, as snow whispered down around them. The cold pressed in from every side. Yet Lena felt something warm spreading through her chest, something that had nothing to do with the cup of cocoa she held. Riley stayed close, her small mitten wrapped around the hem of Graham's coat, as if she were the bridge holding these two wounded adults in place. And perhaps, in her own unlikely way, she was. Graham took in a slow breath, the kind a man takes when he's trying to read a situation carefully, respectfully. He didn't push. He didn't pry. He simply stood steady, offering a presence that felt strangely grounding. "You don't have to explain anything," he said softly. "But if you need someone to sit with you for a minute, we can do that." Lena looked away, blinking against fresh tears. Kindness, when one is fragile, can cut deeper than cruelty. "I don't want to be a burden," she murmured. Graham let out a quiet huff of breath, not quite a laugh, more like a gentle correction. "Ma'am," he said, "Riley doesn't offer cocoa to people who are burdens." Riley nodded vigorously, as if this were an established law of the universe. Only heroes and nice people. Lena pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed by how quickly this child had pierced the walls she'd built out of discipline, routine, and duty. Snow gathered on the bench beside her, but she didn't sit. Her nerves wouldn't let her stay still. Instead, she paced a single step, then another. "My father," she began, then stopped. Even the words felt unstable. Graham waited. He understood that sometimes the hardest part of speaking wasn't the story, it was trusting someone enough to tell it. "They took him into surgery tonight. Heart complications." Her voice cracked again. "And I can't get home. I'm not allowed to leave the base." Graham's brow furrowed. Not allowed on Christmas Eve. because of what Lena swallowed hard. Shame wasn't the right word, but it sat in her stomach like a stone. I was suspended, she said quietly, for leaking restricted information. She let out a bitter breath, which I didn't do. Riley gasped softly, as though this were the greatest injustice she had ever heard. Graham, however, went still, not with shock, but with recognition. Something in his eyes sharpened, though his tone remained gentle. You're certain it was a setup, yes. But certainty doesn't matter when the person accusing outranks you. Lena wrapped her arms around herself. The officer who signed the order. He's been pushing me for months, ever since he took over my department. I thought I could handle it. Thought if I just kept my head down. She broke off the wind, stealing the rest of her sentence. Graham's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in a quiet, steady kind of resolve. The kind of thing a man carries after years of watching good people get worn down by those who mistake authority for strength. He shifted slightly, positioning himself so his body blocked the wind from hitting her directly. It was a small gesture, subtle enough she might not have noticed if she weren't already tuned to every kindness tonight. I used to know men like that, he said. Had a couple of them for supervisors back in my Navy days. The type who climb fast because they're standing on the backs of people who work harder than they ever did. Lena lifted her eyes to him. You were Navy aircraft mechanic, he said simply. FA-18 Hornets, mostly. Long time ago. Something in Lena's expression softened. A shared understanding formed an unspoken language between people who had served, who had sacrificed, who knew the weight of duty and the sting of betrayal. How long were you in? She asked. 12 years, he said. Got out after. Well, he hesitated not out of secrecy, but out of pain. After Riley's mom passed, I needed to be home, not deployed. Lena felt her heart twist. She looked down at Riley, so bright, so warm, so full of life, and wondered how much heartbreak her father carried behind those steady eyes. Riley, unaware of adult sorrows, tugged on Lena's sleeve. Daddy fixes broken things, she announced proudly. He can fix airplanes and broken doors, and even broken hearts. Lena felt a tear slip down her cheek before she could stop it. Graham cleared his throat softly. I can't fix everything, he murmured, gently brushing snow from Riley's hat. But I can listen, and I'm good at finding things that don't add up. He met Lena's gaze again, his tone calm but unwavering. If you didn't leak anything, then someone else did, and whoever framed you probably left something behind. People who cheat usually do. Lena blinked, startled by the certainty in his voice. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt a thread of hope. But it was Graham's next words that changed everything. If you want, I can help. Lena stared at him, stunned. She didn't know this man. She had met him 10 minutes ago. Yet something about the way he said it, steady, honest, without expectation, made her believe him. Why, she whispered. Why help me? Graham's answer was immediate, without hesitation. Because good people deserve someone in their corner. He glanced down at Riley. And because my daughter doesn't offer cocoa to just anyone. Riley nodded solemnly. She's a good lady, Daddy. I can tell. Lena pressed the warm cup closer to her chest, letting the heat seep in not only through her gloves, but through the cracks in her heart. The snow fell thicker now, swirling in slow circles around them, as the world grew quieter, almost reverent. For the first time all day, Lena felt something shift inside her. Something steady. Something like support, borrowed warmth, borrowed hope, and maybe, just maybe, borrowed strength. Snow crunched beneath their boots as the three of them walked slowly down the dimly lit sidewalk, following the road away from the bus stop. Graham hadn't pushed her to explain more. He simply said, "Let's walk a bit. Sometimes moving helps the mind settle." And oddly enough, Lena found herself agreeing. Movement kept her from collapsing under the weight of everything. Riley skipped ahead of them, never wandering too far, twirling in falling snow like a miniature crimson lantern. Her bright laughter rose into the cold night, a gentle reminder that innocence could still exist, even when the world felt heavy. For a while they walked in silence, a silence that wasn't awkward, a silence that held space. Finally, Lena inhaled a shaky breath. "Do you ever feel like life circles back on you?" she asked softly. "Like you're being asked to face the same storm twice?" Graham glanced at her quietly, attentive. "More times than I can count." She nodded, eyes fixed on the swirling snow. "Tonight, everything feels familiar in a way I can't explain. The fear, the helplessness, the cold." Her voice faltered. "It feels like another storm I lived through when I was a kid." Graham slowed, as if sensing something important was rising to the surface. "What storm was that?" he asked gently. She hesitated, the memory flickering like an old, half-mended scar. "I was 9. My father was stationed in San Diego back then. We lived near the coast. One night, a sudden squall hit, one of those freak storms that rolls in fast. I'd been outside playing, and before I knew it, the wind picked up, the waves slammed the pier, and I got trapped at the far end." She swallowed hard. "I remember screaming. I remember the water slapping up, icy and violent. I remember thinking I was going to disappear." Graham's breath caught almost imperceptibly. "A young mechanic from the base found me," Lena continued. "He had been there doing maintenance on a patrol boat. He heard me crying through the storm." Her voice softened. "He ran out onto that shaking pier, grabbed me, wrapped me in his jacket, and held on, even as waves hit us both. He didn't leave me until the storm passed." She blinked back tears. "I never knew his name. I only remember his voice, calm, steady. He kept saying, 'You're safe. I've got you. Just hold on.'" She exhaled the memory, both painful and comforting. And tonight, she whispered, with everything going wrong again, "I kept wishing someone like him would show up." They stopped walking. Riley, noticing the change in pace, paused a few steps ahead and turned curious. Graham was staring at Lena, not with confusion, but with something deeper. Recognition. Shock. Something old and buried rising like a swell beneath his calm surface. Lena frowned slightly. "What is it?" Graham set his hands on his hips, exhaling through his nose, as though gathering the courage to speak a truth he'd kept hidden from himself for years. "San Diego," he said slowly. 20 years ago, that storm on the pier." His voice dropped to a quiet, almost reverent tone. "Lieutenant, that was me." Lena blinked. Once. Twice. The world around them seemed to freeze mid-snowfall. "You," she whispered. "You were the one who I was 19, Graham said. "Just a crewman back then. My unit got called in because a maintenance alarm tripped on a coastal patrol boat. I was checking wiring when the storm hit. I heard a child's cry. Your cry." He looked down briefly, then back into her stunned eyes. "I didn't think. I just ran." Lena covered her mouth with trembling fingers. "I remembered you." Graham continued softly. "Not your name, not your family, but your eyes. You had this look, this mixture of fear and bravery. I wrapped you in my jacket. You were shivering so hard you could barely breathe." Lena let out a shaky laugh as tears slipped down her cheeks. "I still remember how that jacket smelled like engine oil and laundry soap." Graham's smile was small, but warm. "Sounds like my jacket." Riley broke the silence with a delighted gasp. "Daddy." You saved her when she was little, Graham nodded gently. Seems that way. Riley placed both mittened hands on her cheeks in theatrical awe. That means she's supposed to be our friend. Daddy, that's a sign. Lena laughed through her tears, the sound fragile, but real. She turned back to Graham. All these years, she whispered, I wanted to thank the man who saved me. You already did, Graham replied quietly. You lived. You grew up. You served. That's thanks enough. But Lena shook her head, emotion tightening her throat. No. You gave me more than safety that night. You gave me a reason to believe that people will show up when it matters. I wouldn't be who I am today without that moment. Graham looked down, humbled beyond words. Funny thing is, that night changed me too. I didn't think anyone noticed a mechanic on the pier, but you held on to me like I was the only person in the world who could save you. He paused. I guess for a moment I was. Snow swirled around them as the wind slowed like the night itself was holding its breath for what came next. I can't believe this, Lena whispered. Fate's got a sense of humor, Graham said gently. No, Lena corrected, softly wiping tears from her cheeks. Fate's got a sense of kindness. Riley, impatient with adult pacing, tugged on Graham's sleeve. Does this mean we're family now? Lena knelt down to Riley's height, her expression warm and tender. Maybe not yet, she said with a smile. But I think it means our lives were meant to cross again. Riley nodded solemnly, satisfied with this explanation. Good. Daddy doesn't have a lot of friends. You should be one. Graham rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. She's not wrong. Lena looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time with full understanding. Not just a man offering help. Not just a father to an extraordinary little girl. But the boy who saved her life, now returning into it, at the moment she needed someone again. This time, not through a storm at sea, but through a storm of the heart. And she felt something she had not felt all day, something she thought she had lost beneath fear, duty, and despair. Hope. The snowfall had softened by the time they reached the small coffee shop near the corner, a warm, glowing refuge in a world that felt too cold for Lena's fragile heart. Through fogged windows, Lena could see the soft amber light flickering against wooden walls, the quiet hum of holiday music drifting into the street. It looked like the kind of place where the night might briefly stop hurting. Graham paused at the door, brushing snow from Riley's hat, before holding it open for both of them. He didn't even think about it. Kindness seemed to be woven into the way he moved. Lena stepped inside, feeling the heat wrap around her like a much-needed blanket. They ordered something warm tea for her, coffee for Graham, a small cookie for Riley, and found a booth tucked into a corner away from prying eyes. For the first time since the nightmare began, Lena felt she could breathe. Riley sat beside her father, swinging her legs and nibbling her counter cookie, humming some soft Christmas tune, as though she were creating background music for the moment. Graham watched her for a second, his expression tender, before turning to Lena. You don't have to share more than you're comfortable with, he said gently. Lena stared down at the steam rising from her tea. Her hands trembled again, not from cold this time, but from what she knew she needed to reveal. The accusation, she began. It involves a classified maintenance report. Someone leaked a section of it just enough to cause confusion, and then pinned it on me using manipulated timestamps. Graham leaned forward slightly. Maintenance report. What kind? Diagnostic data on one of our communications arrays, she said. We had a minor malfunction 2 days ago. Nothing dangerous, unless someone wanted to make it look dangerous. Graham's eyes sharpened the eyes of a man who had seen technical sabotage before, and who had access to the file besides you. 3 people, Lena said, including my supervisor, The one who signed the suspension order. Graham exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Let me guess, he made sure you were the last recorded person to open the file. Yes. Lena swallowed, even though he asked me to review it. He gave the order verbally, so there'd be no record. Graham muttered a low, controlled curse under his breath, not loud enough to alarm Riley, but enough for Lena to feel strangely defended. What's his name? He asked quietly. Lieutenant Commander Riggs. Graham leaned back, crossing his arms, not defensive, but calculating. I knew a Riggs once. Same attitude, same habits. The kind of man who thinks rank is a weapon. Lena gave a bitter laugh. That sounds like him. Graham tapped a finger against the table, his thoughts clearly racing. And you said the timestamp didn't make sense. She nodded. I wasn't even near my office at the time the file was supposedly accessed from my account. I was in a briefing. But the system says it was opened from my login. Which means someone used your credentials, Graham said. Or spoofed your ID. She blinked. You think he framed me directly? Graham tilted his head. I think men like Riggs don't like competent women gaining recognition, especially not younger ones, especially not ones with spotless records. Lena looked down again, her fingers tightening around the warm cup. He's been difficult, ever since I got commended last spring. It's been subtle, but her voice trailed off. I didn't think it could escalate to this. People like him escalate fast when they're threatened, Graham said. But they also make mistakes. Lena's heart fluttered. What kind of mistakes? The kind made when someone is so sure they're smarter than everyone else. Graham reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. Riggs planted. Something. We just need to figure out what. Riley leaned close, whispering Daddy's good at puzzles. Graham smiled briefly. Yeah, well, this is a big one. Then he looked at Lena with a calm confidence that felt like a lifeline. But I've seen cover-ups before, and I know how to spot a setup. Lena stared at him, overwhelmed by how quickly this man, this stranger, had become the only person who believed her. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know enough, Graham said. You serve with integrity. You carry yourself like someone who's done everything right and is still paying for someone else's ambition. His expression softened. And I know my daughter's instincts. She doesn't attach to people unless they're good. Riley lifted her cookie triumphantly. I told you she's good. Lena pressed a hand to her heart, fighting tears again. I don't know what I would have done tonight if you two hadn't shown up. You don't have to know. Graham said quietly. You just have to let us help. He unlocked his phone and scrolled through contacts until he found a name. Chief Avery, he explained. Old comrade. He works security oversight at the base. If anyone can pull access logs without alerting the wrong people, it's him. Lena's eyes widened. You'd call in a favor like that? For me, Graham nodded without hesitation. Good people don't get thrown to wolves on my watch. He stepped away from the table, moving to a quieter corner of the cafe to speak. Lena watched him the way he carried himself, not forceful, not dramatic, but steady. Anchored. A man who had rebuilt his life from ashes and scars, and the responsibility of raising a child alone. A man who protected others by instinct. Riley leaned toward Lena, whispering conspiratorially. Daddy gets serious when he wants to fix something. That means he'll help you for real. Lena felt a warm, painful tug in her chest. She had spent the last 2 days watching walls close around her. Tonight, a door had opened. Graham returned minutes later, slipping his phone into his pocket, a determined shadow settling over his features. He's checking the logs now, he said. If Riggs touched that file, if he manipulated anything, we'll know soon. Lena breathed out shakily. Relief, fear, hope, all tangled together. Graham met her eyes. You're not alone in this anymore. Riley slid her small hand into Lena's. We're your backup." And for the first time since her world collapsed, Lena felt the storm begin to shift. Not ending yet, but breaking just enough for light to seep through. The snow outside the cafe window thickened into the kind of gentle curtain that made the rest of the world feel distant, almost softened. Inside, warmth hummed softly around them, the scent of cinnamon and roasting coffee lingering in the air. It was the kind of place built for quiet moments, not for unraveling conspiracies or confronting fear. And yet it became the unexpected sanctuary where 3 lives began to knit themselves into something resembling hope. Riley finished her cookie with the seriousness of a child performing an important task. Then she glanced at Lena, her eyes bright beneath the red knit hat. "Are you still sad?" she asked quietly. Lena blinked, surprised by the child's delicate instinct. Maybe a little, she admitted, but not as much as before. "Good," Riley said. "Daddy says people shouldn't stay sad alone. It makes the sad heavier." From the other side of the booth, Graham gave a soft, embarrassed cough. "I might have said something like that." "It's true," Riley insisted, crossing her arms, and somehow Lena felt lighter already. Graham's phone buzzed. The vibration was soft. But Lena stiffened immediately, her heart leaping, as though the entire world pivoted on that single sound. Graham checked the caller ID. "It's Avery," he said. Riley straightened. "Is he fixing the puzzle?" Graham lifted the phone to his ear and stepped into the aisle, giving them some space. Lena watched him with a mix of dread and hope, her cup warming her hands even as her stomach churned. The cafe's muffled music, something vintage and comforting, seemed to fade beneath the pounding of her pulse. Graham spoke in a low voice, his brow furrowed. Then his expression tightened. Not anger, something deeper, something controlled and fierce. A kind of quiet determination Lena recognized instantly. A man preparing for a fight he'd already decided to win. He ended the call and returned to the booth. Riley scooted aside, giving him space, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Well," she whispered, voice barely above a breath. Graham looked directly at Lena. "You were right," he said. "Someone tampered with the logs." Her breath struck in her throat. Avery found traces of a manual override, something subtle. Someone who knew how to hide in the system, but not perfectly. And guess whose ID keeps showing up in the wrong places? Riggs. Lena whispered. Graham nodded. He tried to scrub his digital footprint, but he didn't count on security backups running on a separate cycle. Avery saw enough to flag the whole thing. Lena pressed her trembling hands together. Half relief, half disbelief. "So, they'll clear me. They'll open an investigation immediately," Graham said. "But it won't take long. Not now that the truth is there." Riley grinned. "See, Daddy fixes things." Lena didn't trust her voice. She looked down, blinking rapidly, trying to process the sudden shift inside her chest. For 2 days, she'd been drowning, fighting currents too strong for one person to face alone. And now, for the first time, she could see solid ground. But the relief wasn't what caught her off guard. It was the gratitude. Deep, overwhelming gratitude for a man she had known less than an hour, and yet felt strangely connected to, as if fate had drawn them back together precisely when both needed it most. Graham leaned forward, his voice lower. Warm but steady. "Lena, listen to me," he said. "You're not someone who folds under pressure. You fight. You serve. You show up. You've carried yourself with dignity even when someone tried to break that." His gaze softened. But even the strongest need someone in their corner. A small, shaky laugh escaped her. "I don't know how you just knew what to do." He shrugged lightly. Years of repairing things teaches you how to see what's broken, people included. Riley looked between them and nodded knowingly. He used to fix engines. Now he fixes people, but only nice ones. A smile tugged at Lena's lips. Still beneath the warmth, another ache pulsed in her chest. Her father. The worry returned heavier now that the adrenaline faded. "I still need to get home," she whispered. "I don't even know if he's out of surgery." Graham registered the fear immediately, his features tightening again, but this time with gentle resolve. "Then that's what we focus on next," he said. "Clearing your name is in progress. Getting you home. That's what matters now." "But I can't leave base without authorization," Lena said. "I'm suspended." "Suspension or not," Graham said firmly, "a daughter needs to be with her father." Avery agreed to push the paperwork through. "He'll notify command that the investigation points away from you. You should be cleared to go within the hour." Lena's shoulders sagged, relief washing over her in slow waves. "I don't know how to thank you," she'd whispered. "You don't have to," he said. "You helped me once, or rather, you helped who I was back then. Saving you changed the way I saw myself." His voice softened. "Tonight, I'm just returning the favor." Their eyes held for a long moment something unspoken, traveling between them. Familiar, warm-edged with the promise of something neither fully understood yet. Riley hopped off the booth, stretching her little arms. "Can we go somewhere? Now I want hot chocolate number 2. Graham chuckled. "We'll see." But then he looked back at Lena with a seriousness beneath the humor. "Before we go, I want you to know something." She tilted her head slightly. "Whatever happens next, you won't face it alone," he said. "Not tonight. Not while your father's fighting. Not while you're being cleared. We're here." Riley slipped her hand into Lena's again. "Daddy says backup means you don't have to be scared." Lena felt her heart melt, her breath catching in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you." The warmth in the booth brought not by tea or coffee, but by presence, wrapped around her like a bomb. She felt the weight inside her shift, the fear loosening its grip just enough for something new to settle in its place. Trust, a fragile thread, but real, growing with each passing minute. And neither she nor Graham seemed eager to ignore it. "Ready?" Graham asked softly. Lena nodded. "Ready." They stood, gathered coats and gloves, and stepped back out into the snowfall. The storm had not yet ended, but somehow with a single dad and his remarkable daughter beside her, Lena felt stronger than she had in days. And more than that, she felt like she wasn't fighting alone anymore. By the time they stepped back into the cold, the snowfall had thinned into a quiet mist, drifting over the streetlights. Less storm, more tenderness. It settled on Lena's shoulders, on Graham's dark coat, on the little red hat Riley tugged down over her ears. The city glowed softly around them, as if the night itself had decided to breathe with them. Lena checked her phone again. Still no word from the hospital. The silence gnawed at her every second, stretching long and thin. Graham noticed. "We'll get word soon," he said gently. "Hospitals move slow when things are stable. No news can be good news." Lena nodded, though her stomach still twisted. "I just need to know he's okay." "You will," he said with quiet certainty. They walked back toward the base entrance. Though it was late, the security building still buzzed with fluorescent light. Graham had arranged for Avery to meet them discreetly. As they approached, the door opened, and a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the squared posture of a career sailor stepped out. "Graham," he greeted. "Been a long time." Graham shook his hand. "Good to see you, Chief." Avery's eyes softened when they landed on Lena. "Lieutenant Ward." "I've reviewed your case." Lena's breath hitched. and Avery motioned them inside, lowering his voice. I pulled the access logs from the secure backups. Riggs didn't know they existed. His ID attempted to modify your report 3 separate times. Lena closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. 3 times. He hadn't just sabotaged her, he'd been determined. That's not all. Avery continued. He tried to change your clearance status last week. Denied a request you never filed. It looks like he was setting this up for a while. Riley frowned deeply. That's very not nice. Avery blinked, then offered the child a solemn nod. Exactly right, young lady. Lena steadied herself against the edge of a desk. The room felt tilted. The floor shifting beneath her, not from fear now, but from the sudden weight of relief pressing down with unexpected force. All this time, she whispered. I thought I was losing my mind. You weren't, Avery said firmly. You were targeted, and we're going to fix it. He handed her a printed report, several pages thick. This will go straight to command tonight. Riggs is already being brought in for questioning. His eyes softened. You're officially cleared of all wrongdoing, Lieutenant. Lena covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She tried to speak, tried to say thank you or anything, but emotion clogged her throat. Graham stepped closer, his voice gentle, but full of strength. You're okay, he murmured. It's over. Lena's knees wobbled just for a second, just long enough for Graham to reach out instinctively. His hands found her arms, steadying her with careful, respectful strength. Her breath caught. For the first time in days, her body allowed itself to feel everything. The exhaustion, the terror, the relief, the gratitude. It hit her all at once, a wave she hadn't braced for. I'm sorry, she whispered shakily. I don't know why You don't have to apologize, Graham said softly. You've been holding up the world on your own. Sometimes you have to let someone catch you. The warmth in his eyes, steady, grounded, impossibly kind, brought fresh tears. Riley wrapped her arms around Lena's leg. I told Daddy you were good. That broke Lena's composure completely. A soft sob escaped her, though not a hopeless one this time, more like a release, a surrender to finally being believed. Avery cleared his throat gently, giving them space. Lieutenant, you should also know. With your name cleared, you're free to leave the base. If you need to get home to your father, you go. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. My authorization is restored. Avery nodded, effective immediately. The relief nearly buckled her knees again. My father. She whispered the words like a prayer. I can get to him. Graham squeezed her arm once more before letting go. Then, that's where we go next. Outside, the snowfall thickened again, but softly, like a benediction rather than a burden. The cold air hit her cheeks, cooling the remnants of tears, grounding her in the present moment. She turned to Graham. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You already have, he replied. You trusted us. Daddy always helps people who need help, Riley added proudly. Especially nice girls. Lena laughed softly, a sound that felt foreign but welcome in her chest. But beneath her gratitude, another feeling lingered. The memory of his hand steadying her, the sincerity in his voice, and the quiet truth that beneath his rugged calm, Graham Hale carried storms of his own. Let me drive you to the hospital, Graham said gently. You shouldn't go alone. Her instinct was to refuse. She had lived her whole life being self-reliant, proving her worth, never being a burden. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she allowed herself to nod. Okay. Riley slipped her hand into Lena's as they walked toward the parking lot. You're going to be okay, she said, with a certainty only a child could hold. Good people get good endings. Lena felt something warm settle deep inside her chest. Maybe, just maybe, this night wasn't only about clearing her name. Maybe it was about being reminded that kindness still existed in the world, and that sometimes it arrived in the form of a small girl offering cocoa, or the man who came with her. As they approached Graham's truck, Lena glanced back at the base behind her, the place where she had felt trapped, small, powerless just hours ago. Now she walked away free, not alone, not defeated, not broken. A new chapter, unforeseen, unwritten, but filled with possibility, had begun the moment a little girl said, "You can borrow my dad." The drive to the hospital took longer than any of them expected. Snow thickened again, swirling across the road like drifting memories. Christmas Eve traffic was light, but visibility was poor, and Graham steered the truck carefully, each movement deliberate. Lena sat in the passenger seat, gripping her phone in restless hands. Riley, normally a lively chatterbox, was unusually quiet in the back seat, humming a soft tune and watching snowflakes melt against the window. When they pulled into the hospital parking lot, it was nearly midnight. The building rose before them like a lone beacon in the frozen dark. Lena exhaled shakily. "This is it," she whispered. Graham nodded. "We'll go in with you." "No," she said gently, turning toward him. "You've already done so much. Let me see if they'll allow visitors first. It may take a while." Riley leaned forward between the seats. "We'll wait right here," she promised. Lena smiled tenderly at the little girl. "Thank you, sweetheart." She stepped out into the cold, her boots crunching through snow as she hurried toward the entrance. Automatic doors parted, swallowing her into the sterile glow inside. Graham watched her go, something tense and protective settling in his chest. He had known her for only a few hours, but there was a pull he couldn't deny, like a thread between two storms that recognized each other. Riley tugged his sleeve. "Yeah." "She's scared. I know." Riley looked up at him with a seriousness far beyond her years. "We have to help her not be scared." He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "We did, honey, and she'll be okay now." Riley nodded, though something thoughtful flickered behind her eyes. Minutes passed, then 15, then 20. Graham checked his watch again. "She's been gone a while," he murmured. Riley swung her legs idly, humming her tune again. But the humming stopped abruptly. She slid off the seat. "Daddy," she said with quiet determination. "I have to help." He smiled gently. "You already helped her tonight." "No," Riley insisted. Small fists clenched. "She's sad because she thinks she won't see her dad. I have to help her see him." Before Graham could respond, she reached for the door handle. "Riley, wait." But she was quick, too quick, scrambling out of the truck before he could catch her sleeve. Snow swallowed her tiny form as she darted toward the walkway. Riley, Graham shouted, leaping from the truck, slipping slightly before catching his balance. She didn't look back. By the time he reached the entrance, she had vanished among the clusters of people going in and out of the hospital. Fear, sharp, electric, blinding, punched him straight in the chest. "Riley." His voice echoed off concrete pillars, lost in the winter air. He scanned the crowds, the benches, the waiting vehicles. Nothing. A coldness far harsher than the night air crept beneath his ribs. He had lived through combat zones, through deployments where danger was a constant whisper in his ear. He had lost friends, lost his wife, survived storms, both literal and unseen. But nothing, not even the night he became a widower, compared to the terror of losing sight of his little girl. He hurried toward the reception desk inside. "My daughter, 3 years old, red dress, knit hat." "Did she come through here?" The nurse blinked, startled. I don't think so. We haven't seen anyone that age come in without an adult. Graham's heart pounded violently. Where would she go? And then he realized Riley always returned to where everything began, to where she believed help happened. The bus stop, he whispered. Without another word, he bolted out of the building. The drive back felt endless. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. Every terrible possibility clawed through his mind. The cold, the dark, cars, strangers, a little girl alone. He forced a breath, gripping the wheel harder. "Hold on, baby," he whispered to the empty seat beside him. "Daddy's coming." Snow thickened again, turning the road into a silver blur. The truck's headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the storm. At last, the old bus stop appeared lonely quiet, illuminated by the same flickering street lamp where everything between them had begun. And there, small, brave, stubborn, was Riley. Sitting on the same metal bench, hands cupped together for warmth, eyes scanning the street as though waiting for someone. Graham's chest broke open. He slammed the truck into park, barely remembering to shut the door before sprinting toward her. "Riley," she looked up and smiled. "Daddy, you came." He dropped to his knees in front of her, pulling her into his arms so tightly he could feel her heartbeat against his. "Don't you ever do that again," he whispered, voice cracking. But Riley mumbled into his coat. I needed to wait for her, so she wouldn't be sad again. Graham pulled back, holding her face gently. "Sweetheart, you can't disappear like that. Not ever. You scared Daddy." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I thought helping meant coming back here. I thought if I waited, she'd find me and not be alone." And suddenly, beneath the fear, Graham understood. Her intentions were pure. Her heart too big for her tiny body had led her here. "But still, you're my whole world," he whispered. "If anything happened to you..." Riley hugged him again, small arms tight around his neck. "I'm okay, Daddy." And in that moment, snow falling around them, breath mingling in the cold air, Graham let the fear slowly drain from his body. A car pulled up. Lena stepped out. Worry etched deep into her face. She looked from Graham kneeling in the snow, to Riley clinging to him. Her voice cracked. "Oh, God." "What happened?" Graham stood, slowly lifting Riley into his arms, his face still pale from fear. "She disappeared," he said quietly. "I thought I lost her." Lena's hand flew to her heart. No, Riley, you can't just run off. I needed to help," but Riley whispered. Lena stepped forward, tears sudden in her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, you did help. More than you know. But you can't scare your dad like that." Riley rested her head on Graham's shoulder. "I didn't mean to." Lena's gaze lifted to Graham's two storms, meeting two hearts shaken. And in that trembling instant, she understood something profound. Tonight, she had nearly lost her father. Graham had nearly lost his daughter. And somehow, without planning it, they had all begun to matter to one another. Snow drifted around them in slow, lazy spirals, as if the night itself were exhaling after a long, painful breath. The old bus stop, lonely, weather-worn, quiet, stood like a silent witness to everything that had happened since fate pushed 3 lives together just hours earlier. Graham held Riley tightly against his chest. Her small arms looped around his neck, her cheek pressed into his coat. The warmth of her little body steadied the trembling that still lingered in his hands. He wasn't a man who scared easily. He'd lived through storms, deployments, and the crushing grief of losing his wife. But nothing terrified him like the sight of an empty truck seat where his daughter should have been. Lena stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold night. She looked at Riley with a mixture of relief and tenderness, then up at Graham, really seeing him for the first time in the rawness of a father's fear. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. "I shouldn't have left you two alone in the truck. I didn't think—" "This wasn't your fault," Graham said, his voice low but steady. She wanted to help you." Riley lifted her head. "I didn't mean to be bad." "Oh, sweetheart," Lena said, kneeling beside them. "You weren't bad. You were trying to be kind. You just scared us, that's all." Riley sniffed softly, then looked around. "I came back here because this is where I first helped." The simplicity of the statement, so pure, so earnest, pulled at something deep inside Lena's chest. She glanced at the cold metal bench coated with a thin layer of snow, glowing beneath the street lamp. That bench had seen her tears, heard her whispered prayers, witnessed her breaking, and her being found. She reached out and brushed snow from its surface with her gloved hand. "Do you know?" she said gently, "this is where everything changed for me tonight. Where your kindness made the whole world feel different." Riley wriggled slightly, wanting to be put down. Graham set her on her feet, though he kept a protective hand on her shoulder. The little girl walked to the bench and tapped it proudly. "This is where I told her she could borrow you, Daddy." Graham couldn't help a small laugh, shaking his head. "You certainly did." Riley sat down, her legs too short to touch the ground, and patted the space beside her. "Sit with me." Lena hesitated only a moment before she joined her. The cold seeped through her uniform, but she didn't care. Something about sitting here again felt right, like closing a circle that had been left open for too long. Graham sat on the other side of Riley, completing the little line of 3 figures beneath falling snow. The bench felt different now, no longer a place of despair, but a place of connection. A place where 3 hearts, each battered in their own way, could rest. For a moment, none of them spoke. The city hummed quietly behind them, distant and soft. Riley leaned comfortably against her father while reaching for Lena's hand, her small mitten pressing into Lena's palm with surprising certainty. "I came back so you wouldn't be sad alone," Riley said, as if continuing a thought she'd never stopped having. Lena squeezed the little hand gently. "That means more than you know." Graham watched them, his gaze softening. "You terrified me tonight, kiddo. You know that." Riley nodded solemnly. "I know. I'm sorry." Then, with the logic only a child could hold. "But I didn't want her to cry again." Lena lowered her head, emotion thick in her chest. She swallowed hard before lifting her eyes to Graham. "She has a good heart," Lena said softly. "She gets it from her mother." His voice carried a quiet ache, one Lena recognized instantly. Not open wound, but the kind that heals slowly, leaving a tenderness behind. Lena's expression softened. "You're a good father, Graham." He looked at her surprised. "I don't know about that." "I do," she said gently. "Most people teach their kids rules. You taught her kindness." The compliment settled into him slowly, like warmth spreading through a house on a cold night. He didn't often receive such words, nor did he know how to hold them. But tonight, they mattered. Riley, oblivious to the emotional weight between the adults, swung her legs again. "I like when Daddy helps people. I wanted to help too." Lena leaned closer. "You did more than help. You changed someone's whole night." Riley's face brightened with pride. A soft buzz broke the quiet. Lena's phone. Her heart lurched as she fumbled for it. "Caller ID hospital." Graham straightened alert. "Go ahead," he said quietly. Lena answered with trembling fingers. "Hello?" "Yes, this is Lena Ward." Silence as she listened. Her breath caught. Her hand flew to her mouth. Then slowly her shoulders loosened. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, doctor." Yes, I'll be there soon." She ended the call and looked at Graham and Riley, eyes shining with tears, but no longer fear. He made it through surgery, she said. They say he's stable. Riley clapped her hands, a tiny burst of joy. See good endings. A quiet laugh broke from Lena, a sound fragile and beautiful. I can't believe this night, she whispered. Hours ago I thought I was losing everything. And now it feels like the world opened up again. Graham placed a hand over Riley's shoulders. You're not alone anymore, Lena. Not tonight. She stared at him, her breath visible in the cold air. Something unspoken hung between them. Something fragile, warm, inevitable. Riley reached out and took both their hands, linking them. You both looked sad, she said simply. But when you're together, you look less sad. Graham felt something inside him shift, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. And Lena, she felt it too. This bench, this cold, ordinary bus stop had become sacred in its own quiet way, a place where a child's innocence rewrote the ending of an adult's storm, a place where a single dad began to soften toward a future he thought he'd never have, a place where a soldier remembered how to hope. Riley squeezed their hands again. We're all okay now. And for the first time, Lena believed it. The drive from the bus stop to Lena's childhood home wound through quiet neighborhoods blanketed with snow, each house glowing softly with warm yellow windows and Christmas lights. It felt like traveling through a memory, one Lena had almost forgotten she still had a right to revisit. Riley pressed her nose against the window, tracing tiny shapes in the fog her breath left behind. Graham stole occasional glances at Lena, noting the quiet tremors in her hands, the heaviness mixed with hope in her eyes. When they pulled into the narrow driveway, Lena exhaled shakily. This is it, she whispered. Her house stood modest and steady, a single porch light shining like a guardian in the night. A small wreath hung on the door, simple pine branches her father always fashioned by hand. He never buys wreaths, Lena whispered, half smiling, despite everything. Says anyone who buys one is being robbed blind. Graham chuckled softly. Sounds like a practical man, he is, Lena said, and stubborn, and too proud for his own good. Her voice wavered. He raised me alone after my mom died. He taught me everything about strength, and I wasn't even sure I'd get to say goodbye. She swallowed hard. Let's go in, Graham said gently. Lena nodded, blinking back the sheen of tears. Inside the house smelled faintly of cedar and the old carpet her father had refused to replace. Family photos lined the entryway. Her father in uniform, her as a toddler. On his shoulders, faded Christmas mornings with crooked trees and mismatched ornaments. Riley pointed at a photo. Is that you? When you were little, Lena laughed lightly. Yes, I used to wear my hair in those ridiculous pigtails. I like them, Riley announced with authority. They moved toward the living room. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, half-decorated strands of light still in their box. Her father must have started it before his health worsened. Lena moved closer, touching a branch gently. He never finished, she whispered. He always decorated it on the 23rd. It's our tradition. Graham stepped beside her. Then maybe tonight, we finish it for him. Before she could answer, the soft grumble of a nurse sounded from the hallway. Lieutenant Ward Lena straightened. Yes, the nurse smiled kindly. Your father woke up a few minutes ago. He's tired, but he's asking for you. Relief burst through Lena so suddenly that she nearly lost her balance. Graham reached out instinctively, steadying her with a gentle hand on her back. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded, though her voice trembled. I think so. Go to him, he said. We'll stay out here." Lena hurried down the hall. The room was dimly lit, warm quiet. Her father lay propped against pillows, cheeks pale, but eyes bright with stubborn fire. "Dad," Lena whispered. He turned his head slowly, his breath catching. "Lena!" She rushed to him, taking his rough, calloused hand in both of hers. Tears spilled freely this time without shame. "I'm here," she said. "I'm right here." He squeezed her hand weakly. "You came, even with everything. Everything's okay now," she whispered. "It's all being fixed, I promise." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, an old gesture he used whenever she was scared as a child. "You always were a fighter," he murmured. "Your mother would be proud." Lena bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. "She sent good people to you tonight," he whispered. Lena laughed softly through tears. Yes, she did. Back in the living room, Riley tugged at Graham's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered. "Can we decorate the tree for her?" Graham hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think that's exactly what we should do." They unpacked the boxes of ornaments, each one old, mismatched, many handmade. Riley treated every ornament like treasure, carefully placing them on the lower branches, while Graham filled in the higher ones. When Lena returned, wiping the last traces of tears from her face, she stopped in the doorway. Her breath caught. Graham was holding a string of lights. Riley was draped in tinsel, like a tiny, sparkling superhero. The tree glowed with soft amber light, still crooked, still imperfect, but warm and full of life. The kind of tree her father loved. "What? What are you two doing?" she whispered. Riley beamed. "Finishing Christmas." Graham shrugged lightly, but his eyes were warm. "Couldn't leave it half done." Lena pressed a hand to her heart, overcome by the tenderness of it all. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you." They stepped aside so she could approach the tree. She reached for the final ornament, a small wooden star carved by her father when she was 10. "He always let me put this one on last," she said softly. Graham crouched down so Riley could see better. Together, they watched Lena lift the star and place it gently on the topmost branch. The lights reflected off her eyes, turning them into shimmering pools of warmth. Riley sighed happily. Now it looks like Christmas. And for the first time in years, maybe since her mother passed, Lena agreed. She turned toward them. Something inside her softened, melted, opened. "I don't know how to ever repay you," she said. "You don't need to," Graham replied quietly. Riley added, "We're your backup." Lena let out a breathy laugh. "I'm starting to realize that." They stood together around the tree. The soldier, the singledad, the miraculous little girl bathed in the glow of something deeper than Christmas light. Connection. Comfort. A new beginning gently unfolding. The kind of warmth Lena had forgotten life could offer. The house had grown quiet. After the tree was finished, quiet, in the way only Christmas Eve could be. A hush of warmth, a hush of gratitude, a hush that came when hearts were full, and the world seemed to slow down long enough for breath to catch up with emotion. Lena stood before the glowing tree, its golden light casting soft halos around her silhouette. She touched an ornament, gently smiling through a sheen of tears. She no longer felt the need to hide. Behind her, Riley curled up on the sofa beneath a knitted blanket, tired from the long night and the excitement of decorating. Within minutes, she drifted to sleep, her tiny breaths steady and peaceful. Graham watched his daughter for a long moment, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. His expression softened, one of those rare, unguarded looks a man gives only when he thinks no one is watching. Then he rose quietly and walked toward Lena. "You did a beautiful job," he said softly. Lena turned the tree's lights flickering in her eyes. We did it, she corrected. Together. Yeah, he murmured, together. For a moment, neither spoke. Snow tapped gently against the window. The house, once filled with worry, now radiated a gentle warmth. Yet despite the comfort, something unspoken hung between them, delicate and shimmering, like a thread of frost. Your father looked strong, Graham said. Stronger than I expected after a surgery like that. He's stubborn, Lena replied with a small laugh. He told the nurse he wants to go home tomorrow. They told him that's optimistic. He told them optimism is a military virtue. That sounds like something he'd say. Her smile faded into something softer. He asked about you. Graham blinked. About me? Yes. When I told him what you and Riley did for me. He said he wanted to meet the man who remembers how to show up. She paused. You made quite an impression. Graham looked away for a moment, unsure how to absorb such praise. He wasn't used to it. Most of his life had been spent working quietly, fixing what needed fixing, helping where he could, but rarely being acknowledged for it. Your dad's a good man, he said quietly. You can tell a lot about a person by the way they raise their kids. Lena blushed faintly at the unexpected compliment. They both fell silent again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy. It was full, expectant, almost warm. Lena shifted slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Graham, can I ask you something of course. Do you ever feel like life gives you second chances when you least expect it? He exhaled slowly, leaning against the arm of the couch. I used to think second chances were for other people, people who hadn't made mistakes, people who hadn't lost what mattered most. His eyes drifted to Riley, but then she came along, and she changed everything. Lena followed his gaze, her heart softening even more than it already had. She's extraordinary. She's my miracle, he said, was cracking just slightly. After my wife passed, I didn't think I'd ever feel anything but loss again. But Riley didn't let me stay in the dark for long. Lena stepped closer. You carry grief in a beautiful way, Graham. You don't hide it, you honor it. And still, you choose kindness every single time. Their eyes met. Something shifted. Something gentle. Something unmistakable. Something neither of them had planned for, but both felt. You helped me tonight, Lena whispered. Not just with the suspension. Not just with getting to see my dad. You helped me remember who I am. You didn't forget, he said softly. You were just overwhelmed. Anyone would be. But not everyone would have done what you did, she murmured. Graham swallowed, his voice low. I'd do it again. 100 times. The warmth between them deepened, slow, steady, real. Riley stirred slightly, but didn't wake. The blanket fell from her shoulder, and Graham gently tucked it back around her. Lena watched, her heart tugging in a way she hadn't felt in years. Graham. She began, voice barely above a breath. Earlier tonight when Riley said I could borrow you, I laughed. I didn't think anything of it. He smiled. She says a lot of things without thinking. But now Lena continued, her voice trembling just slightly. I'm starting to understand what she meant. Graham's breath hitched. What do you mean? She took one small step closer, her hand brushing his. Not intentionally, but not accidentally either. I mean that. For the first time in a very long time, I don't feel like I'm standing alone. And I don't want this, whatever this is, to be something temporary. Something borrowed. Graham felt his heart stutter. He inhaled slowly, carefully, as though the moment were fragile enough to break. And what do you want it to be? He whispered. Lena held his gaze, eyes shining. Something real, something steady, something I can choose. Not because I'm scared or hurting, but because tonight showed me who you are. His chest tightened. He hadn't expected this, but he wanted it, more than he'd allowed himself to admit. Lena, he said softly, I'm not going anywhere, not unless you ask me to. She shook her head gently. I won't. A beat, a breath, a quiet promise settling between them. Riley murmured in her sleep as if offering her approval. Lena smiled, warm, bright, brimming with something new. Then she placed her hand over his fingers, intertwining naturally, seamlessly. We don't need to borrow anymore, she whispered. And Graham, steady, grounded. Graham let out a slow breath of relief and acceptance. No, he said softly. We really don't. The tree glowed beside them. The snow fell gently outside. And for the first time in years, two hearts. Long guarded, long. Weathered found something unexpected belonging. Morning arrived gently, with the pale gold of winter sunlight filtering through Lena's living room curtains. Snow still blanketed the world outside, but the Christmas Eve storm had passed, leaving the streets quiet and glistening like polished glass. Riley was the first to stir. She blinked sleepily from beneath her blanket, then sat up, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. When she saw the tree, fully lit ornaments shining, she gasped in delight. It's Christmas, she whispered, as if afraid to wake the magic too suddenly. Graham opened his eyes slowly from the armchair where he had dozed off. His neck ached, but it was a familiar welcome ache, the kind that came from protecting his daughter from choosing to stay up in case Lena needed anything in the night. He stretched quietly, trying not to disturb the peaceful hush. Lena emerged from the hallway a moment later, her hair loosely tied. Her uniform swapped for a soft sweater and jeans, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't look like a soldier on alert. She looked like someone who'd finally found a moment of peace. How's your father? Graham asked, standing as she approached. He's good. Lena said, her voice warm. He slept through the night. The doctors think he'll make a full recovery. Relief washed across Graham's face, genuine and unguarded. That's wonderful. It is, Lena said softly. She held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, gratitude shimmering behind her eyes. Riley hopped off the sofa and ran to Lena, hugging her legs tightly. Can we go to the bus stop now? Lena blinked. The bus stop. Riley nodded, her expression earnest. Because that's where everything good started. And Daddy forgot to say thank you to the bench. Graham stifled a laugh while Lena crouched to Riley's height. You want to go back there? Yes, we have to. Children had a way of seeing the world with a clarity adults often missed, and somehow returning to that simple bench, it felt right. Like closing the final page of a chapter before opening a new one. Lena exchanged a glance with Graham. He nodded. Let's go. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked together down the quiet morning streets. The city was hushed, but not with loneliness. Rather with that special stillness Christmas morning always carried. Chimneys puffed gentle clouds into the air. Someone in the distance played soft holiday music. And then turning the final corner, they saw it. The bench. Simple. Cold. Ordinary to the rest of the world. Extraordinary to them. It looked exactly as it had the night before, with a new dusting of snow, as if the world had tried to give it a clean page for Christmas morning. Riley ran ahead, brushing snow off the seat with her mittened hands. She tapped the metal proudly. Here it is, she declared. Graham chuckled as he caught up. Well, hello, old friend. Lena reached the bench last. She stopped taking in the sight of it. The place where she'd cried from despair, where a child had offered her warmth, where a stranger had become something far more important. It looks different in the daylight, she murmured. Everything does, Graham replied. Riley hopped onto the bench leg, swinging. This is where I gave you cocoa, she told Lena seriously, and where Daddy showed up, and where you stopped crying. Lena felt her heart swell. Yes, sweetheart. This bench saw a lot last night. Riley nodded. It made us family. Graham inhaled sharply, taken off guard by the simplicity and the truth of her words. Lena set a gentle hand on Riley's back. It made us something very special, she said softly. Riley beamed content. For a few quiet moments they stood in silence, 3 silhouettes framed by winter light, 3 hearts connected by moments of kindness that had changed everything. Then Graham stepped closer to Lena. You know, he said quietly, if someone told me yesterday that my Christmas Eve would end like this, I wouldn't have believed them. Lena smiled. If someone told me I'd be rescued by the same boy who saved me 20 years ago, I wouldn't have believed them either. He chuckled, but his eyes softened. Life's strange. Life's kind, she corrected gently. Their eyes met a long, warm look full of unspoken understanding. Lena, Graham murmured last night. Something changed for me. She waited, breath held softly in the cold air. I realized how much I've been living with one foot in the past, holding on to grief, afraid to move forward. He shook his head. But you reminded me that hope isn't gone, that it can come back when you least expect it. Her expression softened, shimmering with emotion. You did the same for me. You found me when I was breaking. You helped me find my way back to myself. He swallowed hard. I don't want this. He gestured between them. To be something temporary. It isn't, she whispered. Riley. Oblivious to the adult intensity, leaned dramatically against the bench. Can we go get pancakes now? My tummy is starving. Lena laughed softly. Graham ruffled Riley's hair. Yeah, he said warmly. We can get pancakes. Before they left, Lena placed her hand on the back of the bench, like touching the shoulder of an old friend. Thank you, she whispered. Graham moved beside her. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, the way he had the night before, naturally, effortlessly, as if the shape of their hands had been waiting for this moment. Riley took the other hand, and so the 3 of them stood, connected, grounded whole. A single dad, a Navy soldier, a child with a heart big enough to change both their lives. As they began walking away, Riley suddenly paused and looked up. Daddy, yeah, honey. Are we a real family now? Graham glanced at Lena, her lips parting in surprise and tenderness, in something that looked very much like love. He squeezed Lena's hand gently. I think he said softly, we're becoming one. Lena's breath trembled. Riley smiled. Snow glimmered like tiny blessings falling around them. And with that, beneath a bright Christmas morning sky, at the very bench where sorrow had turned into salvation, a new family began. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell us your city, your state, or even your country. Our community is built from stories shared all around the world, and your voice truly matters here. And if this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you of the quiet kindness still alive in this world, we warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more gentle, uplifting stories. Stories of hope, healing, and the goodness in everyday people. Thank you truly for spending this time with us. We're grateful you're here, and we hope to see you again in the next story.